Okay.
And I made a film with Bobby Kennedy, and it was about an infertility vaccine that was developed under, the Gates Foundation and others. And it was developed largely in India, and it was used without any informed consent to effectively sterilize women in developing countries like Kenya. And so what they did is they took the tetanus vaccine, which they give to mothers to prevent neonatal tetanus in the newborn, so-called, and they spliced into the tetanus molecule, the toxin, the human chorionic gonadotrophin, which is a hormone that women produce essentially to maintain pregnancy. To have a healthy, any pregnancy, you've got to have human chorionic gonadotrophin. So what happened is when you injected this into women, they mounted an immune response against it. They were vaccinated against their own hormone that was essential for their getting pregnant and maintaining pregnancy.
If you love these podcasts and you want to be one of the lucky few to get them earlier, then please go over to my Substack and subscribe there. It's only £7 a month, and it will basically give you early access to all my podcasts. And coming soon, I want to be doing some private webinars as well for members. So it will be a combination of previous guests that have been on. So you get the opportunity to personally ask questions for your own situation or for your own education. Also, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I hit over 10,000 a few weeks ago, and I really, really want to keep growing this channel because I know so many of you get a lot of value. And finally, you want your body to stay strong and healthy while we have all the multiple smart devices and radiation that's attacking our body every day. Don't forget, you can also get a discount through my special code Never Settle, which I'll put on the screen. And it's down in the description. And go and buy your stickers to put on your phone, your smart meters, your electric cars, and anything else that might be giving you irritations in day-to-day life. Thanks, guys. Well, hello, lovely listeners, and welcome, viewers. Today, I have a brand new guest for you. It is Dr. Andrew Wakefield, and Andrew was brought to my attention from actually a viewer of the podcast and also a friend. And Andrew, or Dr. Andrew, basically, you're a gastro. I'm gonna say this wrong. Tell me what it was.
Gastroenterologist.
That's the one. And then you got interested in the in autism and what was creating autism, and it was actually that work that you did that changed your life at that point. And now I believe you do lots of films and documentaries and you make films and even though you're clearly English, you live out in Texas. So I'm sure there is lots of gaps to fill in there. And but thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a busy man. I really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. So yeah, no, I hope your audience find it interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. I love that artwork behind you. So let's have a bit of a backstory then, Dr. Andrew. Obviously, you became a doctor, you worked in your field, and then things started to change for you. So take us back as far as you want to go.
Well, and please call me Andy
Okay,
because
Andy,
my
right.
mother my mother calls me Andrew when she's angry with kind of makes me nervous. Okay, the backstory goes back a long way. I've been in this for 30 years now, but I was a mainstream physician, whatever that means. I graduated at St Mary's Hospital in 1981 and part of the University of London, one of the medical schools. And I came from a family where six generations of doctors had graduated from that same medical school. So medicine was very much in my blood. And I became a surgeon. I was a gastrointestinal surgeon with a specific interest in Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, two epidemic problems that no one really had any answers for. And everything was going fine. I ran a big research team at the Royal Free Hospital, which was again part of the University of London. and there were 19 of us. And one day I got a call. The research we were doing was very exciting. We were making great strides, lecturing all over the world, and things were going very well until I think it was May 1995. I got a call from a mother, and she said to me, Dr. Wakefield, my child was perfectly fine, developing normally, had social interaction, engaged with his siblings, played, was learning, had language, speech and language. And at 18 months old, he had his MMR vaccine and he changed overnight. The lights in his eyes went out and he lost his speech rapidly. He had a major seizure, never quite the same again. And he just got worse and worse and ended up with a diagnosis of autism. And I said, you must have come through to the wrong number because I know nothing about autism. I've heard the word, but we weren't taught about it at medical school because it was so rare.
Mm.
1 in 10,000. I didn't even know that at the time, but I just knew it was vanishingly rare. And she said, Dr. Wakefield, the reason I'm calling you is because my child has intractable gastrointestinal problems, diarrhea, alternating constipation and diarrhea, failure to thrive. They're in pain. I know they're in pain because I'm his mother. I just know, even though he's lost the ability to speak, he's lost his words, I know that he is in pain. He doesn't sleep at night. And when what's going on in his gut is bad, his behavior is bad. The two, I'm sure, are related. And when I put him on a diet that excludes things like gluten and casein, cow's milk products, then he has a dramatic improvement. And if he has an infraction, if he gets hold of one of those foods, he gets much worse, dramatically worse for several weeks. And she said, Dr. Wakefield, the other thing is there's an epidemic of this problem. There are so many mothers like me reporting the same thing. And she was able to pinpoint it to MMR, as were other mothers, because at that time in the UK, MMR was given in isolation. So it wasn't that there were 4 or 5 other vaccines in the mix. And she was not anti-vaccine. She'd taken her child to be vaccinated on time, and she was merely reporting what had happened. Now, the fundamental rule of clinical medicine is that you listen to the patient, or in this case, the patient's parent, the mother, because she knows her child better than anyone else. You don't assume in your arrogance that you know better, or that because she's questioning the vaccine safety, it can't be looked at. This is something that is untouchable. You can't, that's not medicine. That's not, I don't know what that is, but it's certainly not the medicine that I was raised and taught to practice. So I put together this team of eminent gastroenterologists, pediatric gastroenterologists, and we started to investigate these children. And lo and behold, the mother was absolutely right. The child had an inflammatory bowel disease. And the mother had been told to this point, look, this is just part of autism. All these symptoms of the gut, they don't mean anything. Put your child in a home, forget about them and move on, have another child. I mean, it was an extraordinary situation.
And this was 95, you said?
It was 95. And so the parents were absolutely right. And when they were right on everything. I mean, this is the thing that the experts, God save us from experts, were wrong on everything. The experts would say, well, autism begins in the womb. There's no normal development. There's no regression. Children don't have gastrointestinal problems. They certainly don't have bowel inflammation. The diet doesn't make any difference whatsoever. There is no epidemic. We're just better at making the diagnosis. We're cleverer than we were before. And they were wrong on every single count. And the parents were right. And this is a reiteration, if you like, of the value of that fundamental rule of medicine is that you listen. And so we looked and we found, and what was intriguing is that when we treated the bowel disease, the way in which we would treat Crohn's disease, for example, with anti-inflammatories and diet and these things, then there was dramatic improvement in the cognitive symptoms, the behavioral symptoms, as well as the gastrointestinal symptoms. So there was some gut-brain link the parents, the mothers had given us an insight into, and it was reversible. That was the great thing. Here was something, an intractable disease that you could do nothing about. Suddenly, yes, you could. you could do something about it. There was a reversible element. We didn't know how much, but certainly children could be made very much better and certainly taken out of pain. So, and my colleagues at this stage said to me, Andy, we, as pediatricians, we can't be seen to question the safety of the MMR vaccine. We can't. I got rather cross. I said, what do you mean you can't be seen? This is your patient. The mother was right. You have an obligation to this patient, not to how your colleagues might perceive you at the Royal College. But they seem to be more concerned about reputation than anything else. And the dean of the medical school, Ari Zuckerman, took me aside one day and said, if you continue this vaccine safety research, it will not be good for your career. Well, I guess he was absolutely right in that. But it was an overt threat. I mean, the system did not want to entertain at any level the possibility that the vaccine was doing this. So I thought, well, okay, I'm an academic gastroenterologist. I need to study this in great detail before making any claims. So I did. I read every paper that had ever been written on pre-licensing safety studies of MMR vaccine, the key studies that should have been done before the vaccine was put on the market and into children. And I thought I must be doing these people a disservice. There must be a paper out there that I've missed that does a comprehensive analysis of vaccine safety, comparing vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. Nothing. Couldn't find it. And so I wrote a 250-page report, really for my own edification. And before entering into this debate, if I was going to question the safety of what many perceive to be the great miracle of modern medicine, then I had to have a sure footing from which to do that. And so that's what I did. And I never said vaccines cause autism. I said further research needs to be done. We published a paper in The Lancet describing the first 12 children with this syndrome and just raised questions. It wasn't what we call a hypothesis testing study. It couldn't be. We were just describing what the parents said to us and what we found when we examined them and investigated them. And that was it. And called for more research to be done.
I don't know if you I don't know if you'll get onto this, but so my son was born in 1999,
Yeah.
and and I didn't know any better, and he had his jabs, etc. Um, my friend's son was born early 2000s, I think it was. No, late 2000s, and her daughter was born 2 or 3 years before that, and they both had really bad reactions to the MMR and have both got autism, but the son has got very strong autism, and like you said, one day he was a lovely, bubbly, happy child, and the next day was nothing like it, and she was out in South Africa at the time. That's where she's from, and she ended up having to do all of her own research and do various things with the child to make sure to improve him, and flew here, flew there, to people that were bringing this to awareness, because like you said, it is being held under that vaccines are causing this. But I've always thought to myself, because my son was born in 99, it must have started happening. These vaccines must have started getting worse in the 2000s. Maybe we were lucky, that he didn't end up with this, because we've seen that it's systematically getting more and more common. So in your research, would you say that it was already there in the 90s, or it did sort of get worse from the late 90s onwards?
No, it started, the epidemic of autism really started with the introduction of multiple vaccines,
Mm,
these polyvalent vaccines, 3-in-1, 5-in-1. So, and the problem has escalated, as has these vaccine schedules. So in this country, children get approaching 100 vaccines now by the age of 18.
crazy, I know.
Many of them are given at the same time for convenience. So they may get up to 15 or 16 shots on the same day. This has never been tested for safety. It's absolutely mad. If I was a heart doctor and I gave you three antihypertensive, anti-high blood pressure drugs at the same time, I kill you. I would kill all my patients if I did that.
Yeah.
So that what you do when you give multiple therapies at the same time, you have to be absolutely sure that there's no interaction between them, no potentiating effect that makes the side effects more common and worse. That's absolutely essential, but not with vaccines. Oh no, they've never done that. I would talk to David Salisbury, who was in charge of vaccines for the Department of Health at the time, thinking well, they might be interested in this. This is important. He wasn't. He was furious, absolutely furious. And I said to him, when you put measles, mumps, and rubella, three different viruses, together in the same shot, what comparison studies did you do with the single shot? We said we had no reason to assume that it would be any less safe than the single vaccine.
Okay.
You're planning to give this to every child in the country and by proxy every child in the world ultimately, and you assume that it's going to be safe and it's not going to be any different from giving the single vaccine? What utter madness. This is kindergarten science.
Mm.
But that's what they did. They gave them together and they assumed that it wouldn't be any worse. Well, I think they're wrong. And I think tragically many children have paid the price for that. But so it's been a moving target. They've added more and more and more and more vaccine. So it's almost impossible. No, it is impossible for scientists to pin down which one's responsible because you don't have enough of any one particular group to do the study that will answer that question because they got so many other things on the same day or just a few weeks later or so whatever it is. So they've made the science very, very difficult to do. And this should all have been done at the very beginning before these things were ever put into children, but they weren't. So I realized that this was going to get me in hot water, but I'm a consenting adult. I was raised to believe that medicine puts the patient first above all things. And so they came after me. And they came after me in the biggest way. Now we're familiar now. Post-COVID, we're familiar. Everybody's familiar with cancel culture.
Yeah.
One of the most eminent physicians, scientists having their careers destroyed because they questioned the safety of the COVID shot. And it went against public policy and it went against the profiteering of the pharmaceutical companies and others. And so it could not be allowed to exist. So some of the most learned, outstanding physicians in the world had their careers destroyed overnight as a matter of convenience. But then it didn't exist. It was me. it was just, what do you do? And this isn't a hard luck story. It's just a historical fact of life. And there were, on the one hand, there was the advocates for the vaccine, those deeply invested in it, like UNICEF and the World Health Organization and the governments of the world and the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health and the American Medical Associations and the drug. I was they were massive, and it was me, and they got James Murdoch, who's Rupert Murdoch's son, put him on the board of GlaxoSmithKline, Europe's biggest MMR manufacturer, as a non-executive director. And his target was me, to go after me. And that's what he did and did it very successfully. And my career was just destroyed virtually overnight. And I was accused of fraud and lying and abuse and anything they could throw at the wall, they did. And
That must
so
have been really difficult.
it was a very difficult time. It was very difficult for my family, and it was made worse, infinitely worse, by the fact that I knew that what these parents were saying was true. I didn't know to what extent it was true, and I didn't know the depths of the problem, but I knew they were right and that this needed to be investigated, and it wasn't. It was the third rail. No one wanted to touch it because the system was able to say, you see that doctor over there, Wakefield? This is what happens to you if you get involved in this issue. Don't do it. So I was a sort of siren of warning to these other doctors not to get involved. And so I came to the States and I continued the work. I set up a center for autism research and care and education in Austin, Texas, and that was going well, but they came after me there as well and made it impossible for me to work. So over the years, I had people, because of the position I'd taken, people came to me from the industry, from the vaccine manufacturers, and from government agencies like the Department of Health or the CDC, directly or indirectly. And they said, Dr. Wakefield, we've done a terrible thing. We've committed fraud. We've put millions of children at risk. And here is the evidence. And they kept the evidence and they gave it to me. And so I had these extraordinary stories. And what at the time I would pass them on to False Claims Act lawyers in this country to see if there was sort of merit in pursuing them in the courts. But they would make great stories, great films. They were Erin Brockovich. They were The Insider. They were, Spotlight. They were extraordinary stories of corruption, and they were true. And so I started screenwriting in 2004, and as a boff, I read everything and went on every course, and I learned everything I could initially about screenwriting and then directing. And now I've made 6 movies, 2 full-length narrative feature films, and just about to launch into the 7th. So that has been very effective because film has really helped change people's perception. I commend, in particular, a film we made called VAXXED. This was a game changer. VAXXED, to your viewers, and I can give you all the details of how to get it, but VAXXED, and that was about fraud at the CDC. This is an interesting story that in 2000, I was still in England. I came to America to testify before the United States Congress on this issue of vaccine safety and autism. And I was invited by the CDC and others when they were still talking to me to a conference, to a meeting, a closed meeting. There were CDC, National Institutes of Health, other investigators there. And they said, look, Dr. Wakefield, every child gets MMR and only some get autism. How do you explain that? I said, well, that's medicine. It doesn't happen to everybody. A lot of people smoke. Only some develop lung cancer. We don't know why. Does smoking cause lung cancer? Yes. But we don't know the answer. There are other cofactors that are important, your genetic makeup or whatever it might be. I said, but I believe that for vaccines, one of the problems with MMR in particular is age of exposure. The younger you get the vaccine, the greater the risk of autism. Why? Because we know with natural measles, if you get it under 1 year of age, then the risk of a serious outcome is much greater than if you get it after 1 when it's a trivial disease. So age of exposure to a virus is really important. Now we know this. Everybody knows this now with COVID. We know that older people are at greater risk from a bad COVID reaction. But then it was really relatively unknown. So they said, okay, we're going to go away and we're going to go back to Atlanta to the CDC and test that hypothesis. And they did. And they found that it was absolutely true. And they spent the next 14 years destroying the data, throwing it in the garbage, making up new data, falsifying the results, and publishing a paper saying that MMR vaccine is safe and not linked to autism. And at the time, I didn't know anything about this. For 14 years, I knew nothing about this until the senior scientist, Dr. William Thompson, on that study, who designed the study, collected the data, analyzed the data, came forward and did this. He said, I've committed a terrible fraud with my colleagues, and I can no longer live with this. And here it is, because I kept the documents. I knew it was illegal to destroy them, and here they are. And that was the basis of VAX. So we made a film about it. And there was the tragedy, of course. There was no accountability, no comeback, a complete cover up. But the film changed the world. And it changed the world because we sent it to a film festival in America called Tribeca, run by Robert De Niro. And they accepted it. And it was going to play. And then they called us and said, we've pulled the film. First time ever in the history of that festival, they'd censored a film. And then Robert De Niro went on the television a week later on Good Morning America and the Today Show and said we did the wrong thing. Everybody should see this film and make up their own mind. And it exploded worldwide.
Oh, really?
One of those instances where censorship backfired on them in the biggest way. And when Robert De Niro says, you go and see this film, make up your own mind, a lot of people did. And it changed everything. And so from that point forward, we're now at a situation where Robert Kennedy Jr., Bobby is in the White House in charge of Health and Human Services. And there's a huge shakeup of the whole vaccine issue. And we will get to the truth. We will get to the truth. So I couldn't have predicted even a year ago that we'd be where we are now in this country, but we've made huge progress in putting this situation right. There is a long, long way to go, but he's doing a commendable job in bringing this to the world's attention.
Have you met Bobby yet?
Yeah, yeah, no, we've known each other for a long time.
Because yeah, I mean, there's you hear all sorts. I mean, obviously, from what we're seeing, in terms of he's been battling against the vaccines, and the links with diseases for a long time, and obviously now Trump appointed him. He's now got more power to do what he is trying to do. And then you have people saying, "Oh no, he's controlled opposition. He's a baddie. He's this, he's that." So you would disagree with that?
I don't even entertain that nonsense. I mean, where's the evidence, please?
Mm.
He's fighting a huge battle on both sides of the aisle, Democrats, Republicans. Many, many, many of them are funded by the pharmaceutical industry for their campaign funds. He is up against enormous resistance, people threatening to impeach him every day, people threatening his life being threatened. Given the legacy of the Kennedy family and what's happened to his uncle and his father, I mean, please, he's a very brave man doing a great job. So, but people will always come up with some nonsense. If they don't get what they want immediately, without understanding the pushback that he's getting from the system,
Yeah.
then don't be so naive, please. I mean, he's living a very high risk life at the moment, but he is doing a wonderful job. So yeah, people will say whatever they're gonna say.
I know, I know. I mean, like you would have been slandered, and maybe still get slandered. I don't know.
Time. People tell me I'm in prison. People tell me I've confessed to my sins and I'm in prison. I
Yeah, yeah, I
write to
know.
people. I write a note saying, from the so and so penitentiary. I'm due to get out of here. They just people will say whatever that comes into their heads.
Yeah. And to go back to your point, you said about the younger they have it, the more the theory is, the more you think they're prone to it. But in terms of the MMR jabs, they are all supposedly given at the same age, aren't they? Like 3 months and 6 months or whatever it might be when they're babies.
No, no, it used to be 18 months
Right.
18 months, 15 months, 12 months. So it's changed. The recommendations changed.
Got you. Okay.
So it's come down. Now you might argue, well, if it is linked to autism, has autism gone up because they're reducing the age at which you get it
Yeah.
to put more children in that at-risk period of 12 months, the period that the CDC identified in their study. So there are many variables that have changed with time that could account for an increasing incidence of autism if it's related to vaccines, which I believe it is. And what persuades me that it is not, it's the need for people like the CDC to cover it up,
Mm.
lie about it. They know. They absolutely know. I'll read you, this is a paper that was published recently. I haven't been on a paper for a long time, as you can imagine, but this is an outstanding review by Peter McCullough and his team. Peter McCullough's the cardiologist who came to fame in this country and indeed the world through COVID. He criticized the COVID shot. He is the world's most published cardiologist of all time, but his career was destroyed overnight. He's
Mm.
just finished a study 136 papers that purport to look at the Vaccine Autism Association. So everything that's been done, I asked years ago for more research. This is the more research. An analysis of 136 papers. This is the conclusion. Combination and early timed routine childhood vaccination constitutes the most significant modifiable risk factor for autism spectrum disorders. That's it.
Yeah.
There's the further science. It shows that the best, the most modifiable, there's something you can do something about. You can stop this epidemic. You can dramatically reduce the problem if you pay attention to the role of vaccines and reduce those. So that's where we are now. I asked for further research. It's been done. This is what it shows. And so something now needs to be done about that.
So, in terms of you mentioned you were aware of this 14-year cover-up of getting rid of documents and rehashing them in a different way or whatever. So that all came from the whistleblower that came to you and you did the documentary VAXXED.
That's correct,
Yeah.
yes. He came initially to a colleague of mine, and then we got together and
And is
pursued.
he still alive?
William Thompson, yes. He carried on at the CDC. I think he may be just retired now, but stayed on to collect his pension.
Wow.
And we tried to prevail upon Congress to subpoena him and bring him before a committee. They didn't want to know. They didn't want to touch it because it went near that third rail of vaccine safety. Nobody wanted to know. It didn't matter how many children were being harmed, that the rate of autism had gone from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 20 now in this country. People say 1 in 31. It's not. It's even more than that if you look at the whole size of the problem. It's staggering that people were prepared to put politics and profit and policy before the well-being of children. And now we are headed for a number as high as 1 in 2 children in the next 10 years. That's absolutely staggering. And it was all, in my opinion, completely avoidable.
Well, it's the same as the other shot that's been around for the last 4 years, isn't it? It was all unavoidable. We've got, I don't know if you know, there's something called Operation Tala over here, which the police have commended themselves on and said it was all about the safety of the public. And yet it's coming out more and more and more, and the evidence is there that they were instructed to not take any investigation when victims were coming to them and saying, we've been harmed, killed, relatives killed, whatever. And various other people that were spearheading this and saying, hang on a minute, something's not right, we need to stop this. And the police willfully buried it all, ignored it all. And it's starting to hit more mainstream now in terms of what that looks like and what that is, because people have been relentless for the last 4 years. And it sounds similar. I mean, obviously your journey's been a lot longer, but you say, it's incredible that these people didn't stop it to stop harming children, but we kind of know that that's the point, isn't it? They want to harm. They want to, if I don't know what your beliefs are, whether you believe in Agenda 2030 and all the rest of it, but that's what it's all aimed at. It's about dumbing down the population and it's about getting rid of us pretty much. Do you concur with that?
People ask me this for years, at conferences, people at the end of a talk, people would say, Dr. Wakefield, do you think this is deliberate? Do you think that this is a population control experiment, that they're doing this? And I was uncertain. It seemed like a very, very clumsy way of doing it. But I didn't know. I didn't have any evidence for it. And I don't tend to talk about things I don't have any evidence for, because my opinion is worth nothing if I don't know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And I made a film with Bobby Kennedy, and it was about an infertility vaccine that was developed under, the Gates Foundation and others. And it was developed largely in India, and it was used without any informed consent to effectively sterilize women in developing countries like Kenya. And so what they did is they took the tetanus vaccine, which they give to mothers to prevent neonatal tetanus in the newborn, so-called, and they spliced into the tetanus molecule, the toxin, the human chorionic gonadotrophin, which is a hormone that women produce essentially to maintain pregnancy. To have a healthy, any pregnancy, you've got to have human chorionic gonadotrophin. So what happened is when you injected this into women, they mounted an immune response against it. They were vaccinated against their own hormone that was essential for their getting pregnant and maintaining pregnancy. And they became infertile. And this violated everything that I'd ever been taught about medical ethics. It
Mm.
was absolutely staggering. And this was a population control experiment. It was directed or funded by people like the Gates Foundation. And it was abhorrent from start to finish. And that really took me to answer the question, is this deliberate? Is there a deliberate attempt to reduce population? Yes, there is, because they've written that in what they've said about this study. These are. So that really kind of shook me. I was appalling. And so they're capable of anything. When I did that film, I realized that, all bets are on.
Mm.
All bets are on because they're capable of doing this kind of thing. Anyway, so they're really incompetent. I think, for example, the COVID whole debacle and the COVID shock will turn out to be the biggest mistake they ever made. Now, in the UK, unlike the US, I mean, the US, they're trying to cover it up. They failed miserably, but we have freedom of, we have what we have here is the First Amendment, freedom of speech. England doesn't have that, and England is unable to be quite as open about this. But the idea that they're being found out because a few brave, persistent individuals are just not letting this issue go, you cannot cover this up. Okay. In the end, it's going to break. The truth will come out. It didn't come from Wuhan. It wasn't man-made. Yes, it was. Yes, it did. Okay. And the cover up makes it infinitely worse and makes you look evil as well as incompetent.
Yeah.
So it's the biggest mistake they ever made because when I got involved in this 30 years ago, there were maybe a handful of people around the world who were prepared to discuss the thorny issue of vaccine safety. Now, after the films and after COVID, it's more than half the adult population of the world. They've lost, and they need to understand that they've lost and they're going to lose in the biggest way. So just wise up, okay? Because it's going to happen. It's happening right now. And so, yeah,
Uh,
I can
the
go
thing
on.
is, the thing is, and I know Bobby's got a big task on his hand because of the powers that be, and this has all been in play a long time. And however, they are still rolling out these boosters and Christ knows what here. I don't know if they still are in America, but and then you've
With
got
nobody's touching them. This is their big problem. No one, a tiny percentage of the population is having them. So they're rolling them out and recommending them. Big deal. No one's touching them.
yeah, but some people are still touching them, and some people are still getting affected. And then you've got the flu shots, and there's some controversy around that now. Especially mixing it in with whatever was in the other shots, and is that creating problems? And is that I don't know what your thoughts are on the flu shots.
Well, I mean, I've read about what other people have written about it, and Bobby Kennedy will say that there are more deaths from shot than there are from. When he presents the statistic, I mean, it's not just he doesn't just pluck it out of the air. He presents the numbers on it, but it's not something I'm an expert in. It's not something I've studied. So once again, it's not something I'm going to offer you
Yeah,
a considered opinion on because I don't know, and I haven't done the work myself.
yeah.
I'm only really confident in those things largely that I have contributed to and been involved in. So
Well, that's fair enough. And given that you know Bobby well, and nobody has a crystal ball, I get that. But do you have an idea of when they are literally gonna stop these jabs for kids and anything else that might be harming the adult population in different ways?
I don't, but we were promised that the science is now, for the first time, being done. The proper science is being done, and we will have the results very soon. I think we're at a stage where, despite the fact that much of the science remains to be done, there is enough to tell us that certainly on the balance of probability, the vaccines are causing these problems. And at the very least, parents need fully informed consent. No mandates. You cannot force people to put anything in their bodies or the bodies of their children if they have concerns about its safety and those concerns have not been mitigated by the science. So the key is that we have fully informed consent on all the risks and all the benefits. People need to make a voluntary, informed choice about vaccination without coercion, without being lied to, without having their children removed from school and education because they say no. And then the problem beyond that will have the answers and we'll be able to modify vaccination policy accordingly.
And do you have any solutions for parents, if they're finding this themselves, whether it be new parents or parents that have now got a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old that's got, you know, strong autism that creates problems for them? Um, do you have any like, well, if you did this and if you did this, it would really help? Have you got anything like that?
Well, to be fair, I've been out of the clinical arena for 20 years now. So there are better people to answer that question and more progress has been made. So when I got involved, then parents brought to our attention that the diet was very effective for many children. And we found that to be true. And so we would always recommend a gluten casein free diet and then further exclusions after you've done that to once you've established a baseline of improvement to see if taking out other things that they're sensitive to can lead to further improvement. Giving anti-inflammatories mild anti-inflammatories that we would use for Crohn's disease, we found highly beneficial in many children. Clearing constipation, giving probiotics, all of these things have started to emerge more and more as effective therapies. So the interesting thing is it seems largely targeted at the gut. If
Mm.
you heal the gut, if you heal the gut, then you can lead to healing, at least to a large extent, in the brain. But as I say, there are better people out there now who know much more about current therapies, and there have been advances. So that's a great thing. Um, and yeah, they should seek help from those people.
Yeah. And I was going to say to you earlier, so I was really surprised when you said that whistleblower carried on working. Um, d- how did they not get rid of him? Did they know that he'd given you all that information at the time?
They did, absolutely, because we accused them of fraud. We
Yeah.
asked them for an interview. We asked them, they knew, and it's safer to keep your enemy close. He had become their enemy, all right? It was much better that they kept him in the fold, that they were sitting next to him at lunchtime and just reminding him that he'd put himself in a very dangerous position and that he not only risked his pension, but what about his family? I mean, who knows what they did, but he was too close to these people for the longest time. He should have testified. He should have told the truth to a court of law or to the US Congress. And then this would have been pursued. But his colleagues at the CDC were covering up. They were implicated in the biggest way, and politicians did not want to touch it. Because as I've said, their money for their campaigns comes from the pharmaceutical companies, many of them. So it's a very dirty world, but
Mm.
it doesn't mean you quit. It doesn't mean you don't push harder. It doesn't mean that you don't keep going until you get someone like Bobby Kennedy in the position he's in.
Yeah.
Then you don't quit. Then you push even harder.
Yeah. It's not easy, but there seems to be a chosen few that are doing that in different ways around the world right now. Um, and then there's other, people that are pushing in their own way, like I said to you before we started recording, like, challenging the system, challenge in the courts, challenging the mortgage fraud and all that sort of stuff. Um, and so these pockets are everywhere, all over the world, and eventually they ripple out, don't they? Like your research. And on a personal note, was there ever a time where you thought, "Oh shit, what am I doing?"
Yeah. Oh, yes, is the answer to that one. Yeah, definitely. Many was the time that I thought, oh shit, you know. But the children were still there.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the issue. I'm a consenting adult. I knew, at least in part, what I was getting into. I made a conscious choice. These children didn't have a conscious choice.
No.
Their parents weren't properly informed about the risks, the absence of safety studies, any of these things. The children were lambs to the slaughter in many respects. They lost their voice. I had a voice. So stop complaining and get on with it, because they don't have anyone on the inside, science, medicine, advocating for them in the way that they need. And so get over yourself and get on with the job. And so it was very helpful to me to have that constituency of children that allowed me to keep going, that
Mm.
allowed me to put all of those allegations to one side, all of the abuse, everything, and just stop feeling sorry for yourself and get on with it. And that's what I did. And people can say whatever they like. I
Yeah.
don't mind. You know, I never really minded that much, but it was troubling for my parents. They were both positioned and both, you know, they never once questioned whether I was doing the right thing or not. It was simply heartbreaking for them to see their children and grandchildren going through this. And I wish, you know, now that things have turned around dramatically in this country, and with the publication of these papers, uh, my mother's alive at 95. She can witness that. Tragically, my father died. My one regret or my one wish is that he had been alive to see it resolved in some way, because it hurt him very deeply. But who knows? He's up there looking down.
Definitely. He knows for sure. And is probably very, very proud. Um, did you ever fear for your safety?
You know, I didn't really. It doesn't. It sounds kind of blasé, but no. And we got all kinds of the wiretaps on the phone, and that was confirmed by experts and all kinds of threats. But the people that you will need to worry about in this situation, and the people, not the people who make threats, but the people who don't make threats,
Mm.
because the professionals, they just take you out. They don't make threats. So one day you're there, next day you're gone. So the people you nearly, the threats didn't really matter. They were just trolls on the internet saying what they were always going to say. Every crisis in the world throws up these people. Um, and no, I didn't bother. But it never affected anything I did. It didn't slow me down or stop me or make me reconsider. It just, this had to be done. And here
Yeah.
we are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I commend your bravery and your courage. and I guess you were in the right place at the right time, and you weren't prepared to sell your soul, as the saying goes, and for that, there's millions and millions of people that are very grateful. So thank you for that. In terms of the transition into from doctor to filmmaker, is it like you've had two life purposes and you are truly content, or is it, is this just you getting the message out there, but just in a different way, so it feels like the same sort of thing, but in a different way, sort of thing?
It's very different. It's very different. Well, if in the clinic you could help one family at a time, you make a movie, you can show the world, millions of people at one time. You can tell them a story. And as long as you do it with integrity and tell the truth, like the CDC story, then it has a real impact. And they don't deny it because they can't deny it. They don't sue you for defamation because they can't, because that opens a much bigger can of worms that they really don't want to touch. So they remain quiet and hope that it goes away. Well, it doesn't go away. So we just shot a film in Thailand on a COVID movie, and we're going to shoot a new movie now. One of the things that concerns me greatly as this whole vaccine issue unravels, as it will, we don't stop working on it, but it will now. We've reached the tipping point and beyond in a long way. So we will know the truth on that before too long, I believe. But one of my concerns is for what about those children that I first met back in 1995? They're already damaged. Their lives have been destroyed. Their families' lives have been destroyed. What about them? They mustn't be forgotten. They were the victims on the battlefield of man's vain, in many cases, vain attempts to eradicate infectious disease, to master it, to exert dominion over it, as public health has done at the expense of many, many people. And so I wanted to make a film about those who were injured, those who have been affected, and on the one hand, a mother's love, her infinite love for her child, and the lengths she is prepared to go to protect him. Because the greatest fear for all parents of affected children, the one that really haunts them, keeps them awake at night, is what happens to my child when I become infirm or die and I can no longer care for them. Because they're going to fall upon the mercy of a world that doesn't understand them, doesn't care about them, doesn't love them, and they will die on the streets because the system is not geared up to cope with them at the moment. So that tsunami of autism is now, is aging out, and parents are getting old and less able to cope. So it's a movie called The Bequest, and it's one that we want to shoot next year. And so if there's any of your listeners who want to invest to help us make that movie, and that would be wonderful. Go to info@wakefieldmediagroup.com and help us out. And if you want to watch any of the other movies, please go to uh, wakefieldmediagroup.com, and all the movies are available there. wakefieldmediagroup.com.
Amazing. And obviously I'll put that in the show notes and put the link in. Well, thank you, Andy. Unbelievable what you did and what you went through. And in terms of what Bobby's doing and your interactions with him now, we're all behind him, willing it to just hurry up, everything. It just feels like, come on already, come on already. We've known about this for so bloody long, and still, but it's decades and decades, if not longer, of some not very nice people calling the shots, isn't it? And that's all going to take time to unravel. And I do genuinely know that the world is going to be a better place, and it's not going to be as long away as some people think it is. I think it's quite soon. Um, and so yeah, so I really have enjoyed this last hour. I know the viewers and listeners are going to love it. Um, is there anything before we part, that you feel called to share before we finish this conversation? Anything at all?
I think one of the most powerful things for me in my clinical practice and beyond has been the mother's instinct, maternal instinct for her child, well, ill, sick, what's good, what's bad. It's an extraordinary thing. It's probably the greatest gift that we have. It's one of the most powerful influences upon human evolution. It's the reason we're here on this earth today, is the power, the instinctive power of the mother. And modern medicine tries to usurp that. The man, the woman in the white coat tries to take away that authority, that natural authority that a mother has, and say, I know better because I've got a medical degree. No, you don't. No, you don't. You absolutely do not. No one knows better than a mother. And mothers tell me, they told me for years and still tell me that they knew when they went in for that jab, they knew there was a voice telling them, this is wrong, do not do it, do not do it. But the influence of the man in the white coat was overwhelming. They went ahead and did it, and they wished for all time that they had not done that. So trust in that instinct. To the mothers out there listening, please value that instinct. It is so, it will not fail you. It will guide you. And it's really, in my experience, one of the most important things. So when mothers tell me this is what happened, I listen.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, because most doctors don't. And it's all about the peer reviews and colleagues and opinions and what that tick list is in front of them, rather than actually listening to what the person is saying in front of them. They're a rarity. Me and my son have luckily found a decent GP recently, because my son is suffering with anxiety, panic attacks. We think it could be chronic fatigue syndrome and all of this sort of stuff. And it's been going on along, 2.5 years. But we found a new GP that isn't rushing us out of the surgery, is listening, is understanding, is requesting tests and this, that, and the other, rather than take these tablets and I'll see you in 6 months kind of thing. So they are few and far between, but they do exist. And obviously you're living proof of that as well. So
We need more like that.
definitely. Okay, well, thanks again, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you, and I wish you all the very best with your new movie next year as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.